Who does water belong to? Who should control it? In a globalizing world, these questions drive an increasingly polarized debate. On one side are those who believe water is a public good, a human right, which cannot and should not be controlled by interests out for profit. People like Oscar Oliveira, a Bolivian labor organizer.
God has given us water. It rains in the high country, it rains on the lakes, it rains on the fields. The only thing the water company should do is to help St. Peter get the water to the people so that we all are able to use it.
On the other side are those who believe in the privatization of water, that the free market is the most efficient mechanism to deliver the water that people need.
If you are genuinely concerned with them getting water, what is the best route to do that? It's a practical question, it's not a moral question. And a declaration that water is owned by the public, to be managed by the public for the good of everybody, we've had decades of that and it hasn't worked.
I went to Bolivia because I'd heard about a conflict in which the forces of corporate globalization met fierce local resistance. It was a fight over water, and it took place in a town called Cochabamba. Bolivia is blessed with great natural beauty, but it's the poorest country in South America. 70% of its citizens live in poverty. Nearly 1 in every 10 children born here dies before the age of 5. Since the 1980s, Bolivia has been financially dependent upon the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund. These powerful institutions lend money to strapped governments with conditions, such as privatizing public assets, on the assumption that where government has failed, the market will succeed. Bolivia's leaders have followed their instructions, dutifully selling off national industries, airlines, utilities, mines, railroads, to private companies, usually foreign corporations. Many Bolivians resent the idea that their country's policies are being dictated by outsiders.
Es un país muy pobre, pero estamos.
Bolivia is a very poor country, but we are sitting on a chair of gold. We have gold mines, oil, gas, we have everything, but we sell it all off to other countries.
The Bolivian economy got dramatically worse after the United States pressured Bolivia into eradicating its most lucrative export, coca, the leaf that could be turned into cocaine.
Drugs, illegal as they may be, they were 3% of GDP. 18% of exports, that was the estimate we had. To put it in context, 3% of GDP in the US is agricultural and mining sector combined.
Jorge Quiroga is Bolivia's president. He's a former IBM executive with a degree in industrial engineering from Texas A&M.
Illegal as it was, bad as it was, damaging as it was, if you look at it from a purely business standpoint, it was a business with high value added, going from coca to cocaine. It was Milton Friedman or Hayek heaven, all privately run, no taxation, no regulation. And in essence, if you want to look at it cynically, duty-free access to markets. As long as you're willing to lose part of the merchandise in seizures every once in a while.
Politicians like Quiroga fully supported the coca eradication, but the loss of drug money only increased Bolivia's dependence on international financial institutions, particularly the World Bank.
World Bank is the government in Bolivia, and I think in many developing countries. There's no developing country that can get a foreign credit without the World Bank accepting it. So the World Bank said that all the countries that have a huge debt, well, from now on, your water systems have to be privatized. If you don't do this, you don't get money from international loans.
In the 1990s, Bolivia put up for auction the water rights of its largest cities, including Cochabamba. Half of its 800,000 citizens were not yet hooked up to the city water system. Many were paying exorbitant prices for water delivered by trucks. Cochabamba looked like a perfect opportunity for foreign investment. But when the government put the city's water up for auction, only one bidder appeared, a company created solely for the occasion called Aguas del Tunari. Doubts about the wisdom of the deal surfaced immediately. Among local environmentalists and peasant farmers, even the World Bank didn't support the plan.
Why didn't the government stop the process?
It's necessary to bring private investment to develop the water
Sure,
attack
but
the
at some point the government seems, in retrospect anyway, to have been at a terrible disadvantage with just this single bidder getting this contract.
Well, I think it's happened in several times. I mean, Bolivia is not the Brazil of the world where they're lining up to invest in different things. I think we've had lots of processes where we wind up with not as many bidders as we thought.
Aguas del Tunari leased the Cochabamba water system for 40 years. It was a $2.5 billion deal. The contract promised the Bolivians improved service. It also guaranteed the company an annual profit of 15 to 17%. Then, 2 months after taking over the Cochabamba system, Aguas del Tunari raised water rates by as much as 200%. People making $80 a month were being asked to pay $20 a month just for water. As soon as the rate hikes went into effect, people took to the streets in protest. Graffiti began appearing on city walls. This one is typical. With the people mobilized, we will cancel the contract with Aguas del Tunari. Thieves. But who exactly was Aguas del Tunari? Jim Schultz, an American journalist and activist living in Cochabamba, undertook to find out.
Nobody understood really who Aguas del Tunari was. Mostly what we knew was that Aguas del Tunari had a parent company that owned it and managed it, which was International Water Limited. So I went to their homepage to see if there was anything on their website that actually mentioned Bolivia by name. And it was from this page that we figured out that International Water Limited was founded in 1996 by Bechtel.
Bechtel was a name people knew. Based in San Francisco, it's a huge, privately owned engineering and construction company with vast political connections. In recent years, it's been getting into the world water business through its subsidiary, International Water Limited.
And this was not something that the press here had reported. Nobody understood who International Waters was. Nobody understood really who Aguas del Tunari was.
To Schultz, it appeared the Bechtel Corporation had come to town under an assumed name. All around Cochabamba, people were meeting to talk about water.
We are the owners of these fields. We own the roads. We used to own the oil wells and the airlines and the railroads.
Oscar Oliveira, who was once a shoe factory worker, was now one of the most effective organizers against the water privatization.
We once owned the mines, but they've been taking everything from us little by little, my brothers.
Oscar Oliveira is a very respected labor leader in Cochabamba.
1 or 2 years before the revolt, he already told me water is going to be the thing. And he was right. He was right.
Oliveira understood that selling off a water system is not like selling off a phone company. Water isn't manufactured. It falls freely from the skies. It's essential to life. In Cochabamba, peasants said Bechtel was trying to lease the rain. Cochabamba's water problem has worsened over the last 25 years as hundreds of thousands have moved into the city from rural areas and smaller towns. The water system has been overburdened, and the water table beneath the city is dropping rapidly. Many of Cochabamba's new residents moved to the city after losing their jobs when national industries were privatized. In the market district, you'll find displaced miners, factory workers, and farmers jammed together, hawking cheap foreign-made products. Cochabamba's ever-expanding market district now takes up 25 blocks in the center of the city. The neighborhood of San Miguel is filled with migrants from depressed mining areas. Freddy Villagomez showed me around.
This whole block is family and people from my village. For example, in this house is my cousin, then another cousin, then my house, and above that another family, all from the same village.
Like many of Cochabamba's neighborhoods, they've never been hooked up to the water system. So, 8 years ago, the residents of San Miguel took matters into their own hands and dug themselves a well.
This was the well that was finished in 1997. All of us from the neighborhood built it by working together, everyone as a group, so it belongs to all of us by right, because we all invested our hard work in this well. We fought a lot and sacrificed a lot to build it. Right now, 210 families get water from this well.
A single tap provides water for all the household needs of Freddy's father, Angel.
This barrel we use for washing clothes. That one is to store our drinking water. We wash ourselves in the sink here. And since this is a poor neighborhood, the sewage goes out into the street.
Even in parts of the city that were hooked up to the network, Cochabamba's water service was always inconsistent.
I think it's very difficult for Americans to understand this because we have water 24/7. But in Cochabamba, you had people who only had water 1 hour a day, 1 day a week. You had others who had water 8 hours a day, 7 days a week. We can provide a public service in providing safe, secure water supplies to people. We're doing this in Estonia, in Manila, in Bulgaria. We see no reason why we could not have done it in Cochabamba.
The government wanted to expand the city's water network, but according to Aguas del Tunari, it simply couldn't afford to.
Cochabamba operated at a loss of better than $2.25 million a year for the past 5 years, 6 years. They have debts of $35 million. They're running a deficit. How can they possibly expand their water under those conditions? So they have now turned to the private market to do that. In so doing, the rates charged for those services have to be increased to where they cover at least cost.
With rates soaring, people in Cochabamba felt the company wasn't just covering costs, it was gouging them. The demonstrations grew, the streets of Cochabamba filled with protesters. Word spread that not only were rates going up, but Aguas del Tunari could start charging people for water it didn't even provide, including the water from privately dug wells, like the one I saw in San Miguel.
When word got around that the wells would pass into the hands of Aguas del Tunari and they could start charging us for the water, the people took action.
Freddy Villagomez joined a group of protesters blocking roads going into town.
This whole road was blocked. There was a big tree here that they dragged out with a tractor. Then they piled an old car on top of that. Nothing could pass.
The water protests were becoming a water war.
We have protests every day in Bolivia. They go on hunger strike very often, or they can even crucify themselves, and nothing happens.
But this time was different.
Housewives, people that you wouldn't believe that they could become violent. They were there. They were throwing stones against police. Everybody was protesting. Everybody.
We have always repeated those slogans: death to the World Bank, death to the IMF, down with Yankee imperialism. But I believe this is the first time that the people understood in a direct way how the policies of the World Bank, free trade, free market, are putting us at such a disadvantage among the most powerful countries.
Aguas del Tunari's initial response to the protest was blunt. If people didn't pay their water bills, their water would be cut off. The response of the government, fearing the demonstrations would threaten foreign investment in Bolivia, was blunter still.